They arrived late. In a universe where punctuality was the lifeblood of diplomacy, this was no small slight. The Galactic Council, an assembly of 200 species, convened once every standard decade. Attendance was mandatory. And yet the humans, newcomers, primitives by every measurable standard, strolled in 34 cycles after the bells had tolled. The doors hissed open with no ceremony. 3 figures entered, unarmed, unadorned, and unimpressed. One wore a leather jacket, actual leather, someone noted in horror, while another chewed something and blew a bubble that popped with a sound like a weapon discharging. The third dragged a wheeled crate, which rattled across the pristine crystal floor with alarming volume. Ambassador Velrix of the Tharn Dominion twitched involuntarily. His kind did not appreciate sudden noises. He turned one eye stalk toward the high speaker. "Are these it?" he whispered, voice barely translated over the comm band. The high speaker didn't respond. None of them did. The humans moved as if the galaxy were theirs already, as if this room filled with beings who had carved civilizations from the void meant nothing. The council chamber, built in reverent silence over 300 years, had never felt so small. The humans stopped near the central platform, directly beneath the council's golden projection of the galaxy. One, tall, dark-skinned, with a faded patch on his sleeve that read NASA, looked up, smiled faintly, and said, "Huh. Close enough." No introduction. No protocol. Just a shrug and a smirk. Velrix's appendages coiled. "They're mocking us," he muttered. "Not mocking," came a reply from the Zeloc representative, her voice low. "They don't care enough to mock." There was some commotion at the rear. Several guards moved in, prepared to escort the humans to the designated observer's bench. The woman with the gum held up a hand and said, "Chill. We'll sit." She took a seat on the edge of the dais, legs dangling. The others followed suit. The council reeled in silence. Protocol dictated that newcomers observe silently for their first cycle. But the humans interrupted twice before the third proposal was read. Once to ask why the chairs didn't swivel, and again to request coffee. That evening, Velrix filed his report. It included the following line: "If these creatures represent Earth's leadership, then their civilization is held together by sheer insolence and caffeine." The real trouble started 2 cycles later. The Korgax Collective, long known for its ruthless expansionism, seized a neutral trade route near the Vesmer border. 3 mining colonies went dark. Scans showed signs of orbital bombardment, but no follow-up invasion. A deliberate message. The council convened an emergency session. Voices rose. War was declared in everything but name. Then, absurdly, General Iraq Best did not believe in legends. He believed in tactics, numbers, and crushing orbital superiority. Yet as he stared at the grainy footage on his command table, footage of human forces taking the Vesmer outpost in under 4 hours, he felt something unfamiliar coil behind his mandibles. Unease. "They're unarmored," one of his lieutenants noted. "Minimal exocets. Low-caliber kinetic rifles. No artillery." Iraq nodded slowly. And yet the Korgax lost every corridor, every control node. No prisoners taken. No defenders left standing. He tapped the display, pausing it on a frame showing a single human stepping through a plasma-blasted bulkhead. Smoke curled around him. His uniform was torn. Blood, likely his own, drenched one sleeve. And he was smiling. "They look like they enjoy it," Iraq muttered. His subcommanders exchanged wary glances. Whispers had spread like radiation since the Vesmer broadcast leaked. Stories of human boarding parties slipping through vent shafts. Of fake retreat signals luring Korgax squads into blind alleys. Of strange music, thunderous and wordless, blaring from human transport ships before every strike. Now the Korgax had escalated. 10 warships blockaded human-controlled space. A statement of dominance. No official declaration of war, just brute intimidation. It was a trap designed to provoke. And the humans, maddeningly, did not bite. For 3 standard days there was silence. Then, without warning, every Korgax vessel lost power. Simultaneously, Emergency backups engaged just in time to record a dozen human vessels dropping out of FTL with surgical precision. They didn't fire a single shot. Instead, they boarded. Iraq's claw twitched involuntarily as the next recording played. Human Marines in compact armor moved like water, clearing decks with coordinated chaos. They used flashbangs, smokescreens, and absurdly outdated ballistics. One human slid beneath enemy fire, laughing. Another took a plasma burn to the leg, wrapped it mid-fight with some kind of polymer spray, and kept moving. One Korgax officer had time to activate his personal log. "They don't follow any pattern," he whispered, voice trembling. "They improvise. They adapt mid-battle. They don't wait for orders, they trust each other. It's not war. It's theater." By the end of the operation, every Korgax crew was disarmed and imprisoned, unharmed. The ships were left adrift, engines disabled, with care packages labeled, "Welcome to the neighborhood." Iraq couldn't process it. Why no executions? Why no conquest? He summoned his intelligence officer, a brittle-skinned prowler named Dek. "I want everything on them," Iraq ordered. History, doctrine, culture, especially their warfare. Dek handed him a thin data pad. "It's fragmented. They have no single doctrine. Their military evolved through centuries of shifting ethics and madness. One century of trench warfare, another of orbital dominance, then asymmetry, then cyber-psychological warfare. They excel at not repeating themselves." Iraq scowled. "And their weakness?" Dek hesitated. "Unknown." Iraq threw the data pad across the chamber. "Everyone has a weakness." But the Korgax fleets had returned in silence. Their commanders stripped of rank. Their soldiers different. They spoke little. Some muttered of dreams they couldn't wake from, of battle cries whispered in the dark, of humans who fought not to kill, but to break the spirit. One commander begged to be reassigned. "They stared at us through the walls," he said. "They didn't speak, just watched, waiting." Iraq's next campaign was swift. 30 ships, 2 destroyers, 1 full carrier-class dreadnought. His fleet jumped to a human colony on the edge of disputed space, little more than a desert moon with prefab shelters and mining towers. The planet appeared deserted. No defense grid, no warning beacons. Iraq hesitated. Then the surface exploded. It wasn't artillery. It was architecture. Every mining rig folded into a missile battery. Tunnels opened beneath his landing craft. The terrain itself shifted, collapsing into engineered killboxes. His Marines, once confident, began to panic. Their HUDs flickered with false data. AI companions went mute. Gravity fluctuated without warning. The ground whispered human lullabies in fractured code. He watched it unravel in real time. 3 hours later, Iraq stood on his command bridge, breathing raggedly. 30% casualties. His dreadnought was burning in orbit, its AI corrupted by something humans called a meme virus. They hadn't taken prisoners. They hadn't needed to. They had studied him. They knew exactly, when he'd jump, what his formation would be, what he would do when ambushed. They anticipated him, not just tactically but psychologically. He looked again at the footage. One human saluted a downed Korgax pilot before vanishing into smoke. Iraq stared into that fading image. And for the first time in his career, the general understood the true purpose of war to a human. Not to destroy. Not to dominate. To teach. He gripped the rail. His voice shook as he said, "We were never fighting them." A junior officer turned. "Then who are we fighting, sir?" Iraq's gaze drifted to the darkened starfield. "Ourselves." Ambassador Tyrell Vaughn had brokered peace between warring dynasties, navigated the collapse of the Authari triumvirate, and stared down a sentient supernova that demanded voting rights. But as he prepared to meet the human delegation, his hands trembled. He masked it with a flourish of his cloak and adjusted the environmental controls. No scent. No warmth. Absolute neutrality. This was not a negotiation. This was a plea for survival. The Galactic Accord was unraveling. After the Vesmer incident and the silent fall of the Korgax fleets, Dozens of outer systems had begun defecting to the Terran Confederation. Not conquered, not bribed, just invited. And they had said yes. Tyrell had to understand why. The door opened without chime or protocol. 3 humans entered. Not soldiers. Not admirals. A linguist. A cultural envoy. And, of all things, a schoolteacher. The teacher stepped forward first, a silver-haired woman with laugh lines and calm eyes. "Ambassador," she said, bowing slightly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Tyrell blinked. "I expected different representatives." "We're what's needed," she replied. The other 2 took seats. Tyrell did not sit. "I am authorized," he began, carefully choosing his words, "to discuss terms of ceasefire, resource trade, and future territorial stabilization. In exchange, the accord recognizes." "We're not here for territory," the cultural envoy interrupted gently. Tyrell paused. "Then what do you want?" "Nothing you're unwilling to give." The response was maddening. It wasn't coyness. It was truth. Absolute, infuriating truth. "We don't understand you," Tyrell admitted. "You have the power to crush us, yet you do not. You win every engagement, yet you do not demand tribute. You do not broadcast threats or march your fleets across the stars. You just wait." The linguist smiled faintly. "Because conquest is inefficient. Empires fall, but cultures evolve." Tyrell felt the blood drain from his face. "You're not trying to win the war. You're trying to replace us." The teacher shook her head. "We're trying to invite you in. You can call it replacement if you cling to old maps and old fears. But what we offer isn't dominance. It's relevance, survival, continuity through change." He backed away. "You're consuming us." "No," she said softly. "We're learning you, and you're learning us. Bit by bit." The defectors? They didn't surrender. They chose something better. Unity that doesn't require uniformity. Power that doesn't demand obedience. Tyrell laughed bitterly. "We've seen unity before. Always spoken in the language of the blade." "Then you've never seen a classroom," she replied. The screen behind her lit up unprompted. Footage flickered. Human and alien children sitting together. Laughing. Trading languages. Building structures from mismatched tech. A Krull child teaching a human girl how to levitate a stone. A human teaching an avian species how to draw a circle. "They don't just teach math," the teacher said. "They teach perspective." Tyrell slumped into a chair. He understood now. The humans didn't need to conquer planets. They conquered minds. Not by force, but by invitation. Curiosity. Empathy. Endless, terrifying adaptability. "You're viral," he whispered. The cultural envoy chuckled. "We prefer resilient. But sure. What happens if we refuse?" The teacher folded her hands. "Then we leave. And you will fall. Not by war. Not by economic collapse. But because your people will see what we offer and ask, why not us too?" It was the most insidious threat he had ever heard. It wasn't a declaration. It was a forecast. Tyrell stood slowly. "What do you want from me?" "Begin with honesty. Admit your empire is failing. Then ask what can be saved." His voice cracked. "And if I ask for help?" The teacher leaned forward. "Then we start rebuilding. Together." For a moment, Tyrell saw it. A future without thrones or borders. One where identity wasn't erased, but expanded. Where every child could speak 5 languages, every engineer used alien math, and no species stood alone in the dark. He shivered. "Then teach me." The human stood. "That's the only word we ever wanted to hear."